dissonance being experienced by Trump haters, Kamala supporters. And we say Kamala supporters, we got to put that in quotation marks because nobody actually liked Kamala Harris the same way that nobody liked or likes Joe Biden. They just didn't like Trump, and that person got put up there to get a bunch of support. I mean, if I ran against Trump, then I have a bunch of quote-unquote fans just because people don't like Trump. It has nothing to do with Donald Trump himself. I mean, not Trump. It has nothing to do with themselves. But the cognitive dissonance these people are experiencing right now and the choices that they have. Now, I'm going to explain what this is. I'm going to explain how it happens. And then I'm going to explain what this has to do with human nature in general. It is about Trump, but it's not, because this happens in life all the time to people. But I'm going to reference Trump for it, since everyone has an opinion on Donald Trump, and all of you will be able to understand this. Some of you, I'm going to be talking about you directly, and some of you, I'm just going to be describing the people who you know or have seen experiencing this phenomenon, which is not really a phenomenon. It's really just human nature showing itself to everybody. So let me quickly explain how this works. So I don't know if I should have went this way. I'm looking at my maps. Maybe I should have went the other way. Might have made a bad decision. Actually, no, I didn't. Okay. So when you get in life, let me back up. In life, we all have a certain worldview. And a worldview means just the way that we look at things and the way that we believe the world is, the way we believe the world works, and how we expect things to go based on that frame, based on how we hold that frame. For example, if you have the worldview that a boy cannot become a girl, and now we have all this stuff where people are talking about a boy can become a girl, or that a girl, and affirming actually that someone who was a boy last week is now a girl this week, and if you don't affirm that that boy is indeed now a girl, then you're the one who's wrong. See, that conflict between your view and what you're being told, that creates some discomfort in our minds. And the way that we reconcile that discomfort reveals a lot about who you are as a person, and it reveals a lot about who other people are, because many of us deal with these discomforts all the time. We have a certain view of how things are, or at least the way we thought or think things are, and then sometimes something gets thrown in our faces. Now, sometimes we take the view that we hold and we say, no, I understand how I view things, and what you're telling me is some bullshit. I reject it. And sometimes when something gets thrown in the face of what we believe, we say, okay, maybe I had the wrong view and I'm willing to change my views. Now, when it comes to that specific topic, when it comes to people changing their genders, this is a matter of if you're willing to stand on principle or not, because I highly doubt, for 99% of people in the world, period, especially 99% of you listening to my voice right now, I highly doubt any of you ever had this fluid idea about someone being able to change from a boy to a girl if you're over the age of, let's say, 30. I don't think many of you grew up with this fluid idea like, oh, this can change whenever you feel like it. But you get pressured strongly enough by enough people, and people who have some level of status, or what some of you consider authority, because authority is different depending on who you're talking to. For example, your boss at work has authority to you, but they don't have authority to me because they're not my boss. So authority is kind of flexible. But when this gets presented to you, then you may be willing to change something based on what somebody told you. Let's go back to Trump, though, and I'll circle back to the example that I just gave you there. With Donald Trump, there were basically three beliefs that a lot of people had have had drilled in them over the last, let's just say, 10 years, and it's going to keep going now that he's the president-elect and he has 4 more years. One is that Trump is just a generally bad person because all the things they say about him: racism, sexism, homophobia, xenophobia, and all the other list of things. He has all these charges, and he's convicted of this, and he did that, and y'all know all the things they say about him. That's belief number one. Belief number two is that most human beings are logical and rational and generally smart. Maybe not as smart as you, but generally smart and generally logical and rational, which means when you present most people logical and rational information, they're going to make logical and rational decisions based on the information that they have been given. And when I say logical and rational, I'm really being tongue-in-cheek here. It's really a bit of sarcasm here, because most of the time when someone says that another person is logical and rational, what they really mean is that they just agree with the person. They like the way that the person is talking. They like that the person has similar views as what they have. For example, when I'm doing my live streams, often on TikTok, which as of now, has usually been my most active audience when I do a live stream. I get a lot of people leaving comments like, man, I love your view. You're very logical and very rational. Now, while personally I do believe I look at things logically and rationally and try to be objective, at the same time, I am also taking it with a grain of salt from what I just explained to you, that we usually call someone logical and rational when we agree with them, and you never hear anyone calling somebody logical and rational when they disagree with them. So usually what people are really saying is coding language is I agree with you and I'm giving you a compliment. So this is belief number 2. So number 1, Trump's a bad person. Number 2, most people are logical and smart, so they also believe that Trump's a bad person because they've heard the same information that you heard. And that leads to belief number 3. There's no way that roughly half the country is going to vote for a guy who is a bad person because most people are too logical and too rational to make such a stupid decision. So then when Trump wins the election, now this is when the cognitive dissonance kicks in, because you have this worldview that I just explained, those 3 points. Trump's bad, most people are too smart. Number 3, he can't win because that would require half the people not being smart. And you might think, hey, maybe 10% of the people are dumb enough to vote for Trump, or they like a bad guy, so they're going to vote for Trump, or they will support racism and misogyny and homophobia and xenophobia, so they'll vote for Trump. But there's no way that half the people in the country are that type of person. Maybe only a small subset of people, but half the country, no way, because he needs about half the people to vote for him at least in order to win, right? So then when he wins, now your worldview, these 3 points, are in conflict with reality because something's off. Something has to be wrong here. Out of those 3 things, something has to be wrong. Either A, point number 1 is wrong, meaning your view that Trump's a bad guy is simply not true. Or B, your view that most people are logical, rational, and smart is not true. Most people are not logical, rational, and smart. Maybe most people are just stupid. Or 3, he didn't win the election. It has to be one of those 3. Now, I think most people have accepted the reality that he did win the election. So it's usually not number 3, which means we're only left with numbers 1 and 2. Numbers 1 and 2, one of them has to change to appease or assuage this discomfort that you're feeling that we call cognitive dissonance. Because again, your worldview said things were one way, but reality says things are another way. So one of these 2 things must be wrong. Now, let me tell you where the problem lies. The problem lies in that most people, especially when they have this righteous indignity, this moral high ground stance that they take, and you better be very careful moralizing against another person because there's no human on the planet who is qualified to moralize against another person. Moralizing simply means you are in a position to demean or wag your finger at another person because of something bad that they did. Not that they didn't do it, but because you've done stuff too. We're just not talking about your stuff. We're talking about somebody else's stuff. And people tend to moralize when it comes to known people all the time, because known people, a famous person, their dirt is public knowledge, whereas your dirt, everyday nobody who nobody knows, see, nobody knows about your dirt. It's not that you don't have any, it's just people don't know and they don't care. But you're not qualified to moralize. So anyway, these 2 things. Notice the difference between, there's a stark difference between these 2 options that people have when they experience cognitive dissonance. Option number 1, if you choose option number 1, that my belief system was simply wrong, what does that require? That requires you being humble enough to accept that you believed a story that simply was not true. You allowed others, mostly the mainstream media, and then the people who consume and regurgitate what they hear from the mainstream media, you allowed others to put a story in your mind that has been proven to not be true. Maybe he's just not as bad of a guy as you were told. It's not that the things you were told about him didn't happen, because many of the negative things people say about Trump did happen. Did he get convicted? Yes, he did. Did he have bankruptcies? Yes, he has. Has he had more than one wife? Yes, he has. Did he not gracefully accept the announced outcome of the 2020 election? No, he did not. All of those things are true. However, when you look at the additional facts to go with the facts, and see, this is the reason why all of you need to be careful with this word fact, F-A-C-T, fact. Facts can be taken out of context, ladies and gentlemen. A fact is not the truth. The truth means every fact, all of them, in full context. So that means you have the whole story. A fact can be pulled out of context, and you can make somebody look bad or good if you only give hand-picked facts. So be very careful anytime someone tells you they're giving you, quote unquote, the facts. Most time people are giving you some facts, not all of the facts. All of the facts is called the truth. So the thing about Donald Trump, are there some facts about him that if you only knew those facts, you would think this guy's a terrible guy? Yes. However, is it also true that if you knew all of the facts about him, you would say, okay, well, there's a bigger story here than just he's a bad guy. There's a bunch of facts that make him look like a great guy. And when you put them all together, you see he is what? Human, just like you, just like me, just like everybody else. But again, he has the biggest spotlight on him, so everybody talks about him and his shit. Nobody talks about you and your shit. Not that you don't have it. He's just more known to you. So one would require you saying, you know what, I was sold the wrong story. Somebody sold me a bill of goods. I didn't get enough information. Maybe I need to change my view on this guy and who he really is. That's one option. That's option A. Option B is, or you can just say, well, my story that I believe about him is true. He is a bad guy. All the facts that I have are all the facts that I need. And since I thought most people were smart and logical and rational enough to not vote for him, but they did anyway, it must mean that most people are too stupid, not smart enough, not logical enough, not rational enough to vote in their own interest. They voted against themselves. So if you're black, you voted for your own subjugation. If you're gay, then you voted for losing all your rights. If you're a woman, then you voted to be barefoot in the kitchen and be under the thumb of a man for the rest of your life. And if you're whatever else you could say about people, any group that voted for Trump, you are just too dumb and too illogical and too irrational to understand how stupid of a move you just made by voting for Donald Trump. That's option 2. Now, let me ask you a question. What choice did most people pick? People who don't like Trump. Not even don't like him, but people who actually hate Trump, never Trumpers, the anti-Trump people. What option have most of them chosen? Some of you are listening to this video. What option did you pick? Did you pick option 1, I was wrong, or option 2, they are wrong? Those are 2 options you got. What option do most people pick most of the time in life when reality comes into conflict with their worldview? We know the option most people pick. Most people pick option 2. Why do most people pick option 2? And this is not even about Donald Trump. Most people pick option 2 because option 2 does not require you to change anything in your internal wiring. Because choosing option 1 would force you to be humble enough to say, damn, I thought something was true, but it's actually not true. I believed something that has turned out to be false. Somebody sold me on an idea that turned out to be the wrong idea, or they gave me inaccurate information, or they didn't give me complete information, and I was foolish enough to accept it. Now I got to check myself, and I have to change what I believe, because I now realize that there's more information that I was not given, or I was given some false information. See, that's what option 1 is. That requires somebody to be humble enough to accept that maybe they don't know everything. But option 2 does not require that. Option 2, you can keep believing whatever you have already believed. If you saw the movie The Matrix, this is like taking the blue pill. Keep believing everything that you already believed, and assume that anytime your worldview comes into conflict with reality, it must be that reality, i.e. other people, they're just too stupid to be as smart as you, and they don't see things the way that you see them. So that's the only reason that there's conflict, because other people are just not as wise as you are, and therefore they haven't seen things the way that you have come to see them. That's the only reason that there's conflict between you and them. And this is what a lot of people end up doing. And let me give you all a warning. Those of you who are highly educated, and I'm using this word educated specifically for a reason, because in the United States of America, when people say the word educated, what are they generally referring to? Educated does not necessarily mean people who are most intelligent or most rational or the most logical. When we say educated, what we mean is people who have completed some level of collegiate study. That's what we mean. When we say an educated person, that means somebody who went to college. I have a 4-year college degree. Highly educated would be somebody with a 4-year, and they got more. They went and did more schooling even after that. And uneducated, by definition, when they do data and stuff, and they say uneducated white men and uneducated white women, uneducated means people who did not go to college. That's what the term actually means by definition. And you only hear people using this term, by the way, who are usually advanced degree holders, or people who put a lot of their ego is connected to the fact that they have a college degree. There's no part of my ego connected to my college degree, so you don't hear me using these kind of terms ever, unless I'm using it to talk about or mock these people who think their college degree makes them somebody. I'm not one of those people. But continuing what I'm saying, those of you who call yourselves educated, and not that you are educated, because I'm educated technically by definition, but those of you who call yourselves educated, you go putting this in your bio, right? You put it in your bio that you have a certain degree or you went to a certain college. You don't hear me mentioning these things ever because they don't matter. My performance matters more than my credentials, i.e. my background. Is what you can see what I've actually done. matters more than where I went to school. Who cares? But there are people who put a lot of stock into this because they put their whole lives into it and they got the college loan bills to prove it. These folks, these educated people, are the most susceptible to option number 2. They're most susceptible to choosing option number 2 because choosing option number 1, which means I was fooled, somebody gave me some bad information, I was dumb enough to believe it, that requires them to, again, be humble enough to say, maybe I'm not as smart as I thought I was. But you should understand, any of you know any educated people, lawyers, doctors, PhDs, master's degree holders, law degree holders, people who always talk about what school they went to or that they have a college degree as if that means you should listen to everything that they say. Those folks, people in that boat, I'm sure all of you know some people who are in that boat, and some of you may be the people who are in that boat. Those folks, y'all deal with them. Y'all know how would you describe people like that? They tend to think they're smarter than most of the people that they talk to. They tend to not be open to changing their beliefs on anything, especially from some person who is not as educated as they are. And they tend to always find a way to make themselves right, especially when they're talking to someone who doesn't have the level of education that they have. Is this true or is it not? Of course it's true. And this is why a lot of quote unquote educated people have so much disdain for not only the fact that Trump won, but whoever allegedly voted for him. And I see this on social media all the time. People talking about the people who voted for Trump. Like, oh, you people are just not as educated. You're not as smart. You're not as logical. Oh, no wonder Trump won. LOL. He got a bunch of uneducated people who don't know better to vote for him. No wonder. They were as smart as me, and then they would have voted for the other person. And these folks, they're experiencing a high level of cognitive dissonance, and they cannot be relieved of their cognitive dissonance simply because to relieve yourself of cognitive dissonance will require you changing your worldview. And the smarter a person believes they are, the less likely they are to change their worldview on anything, because again, that will require them basically what's the term that I would use here? Devaluing the value of how smart they have proven or come to believe that they are up through this point in their lives. And we're talking about people who are 30, 40, 50 years old. They got all these years of conditioning of thinking that how smart they are is what gives them an elevated status in society. You think they're going to change it just because somebody who they don't like happened to win when they thought that person was going to lose? Of course they're not going to change it, because again, that requires a certain level of intellectual humility, which many of these people just don't have, in my experience. But if you see things differently, you can let me know. All that said, folks, workonyourgameuniversity.com. You want to learn how to think on a logical and objective level and break things down strategically to be able to understand why people do what they do, even when it seems to not make any sense, and apply this in your business. Doesn't matter what industry you're in, what business you're in. I help people do this every single day. And when we ask people who work with us, what's the thing you get the most out of what I do and what I bring to the table? They say, Dre, you're rational, you're logical, you keep it real, you don't mince words, no BS, no fluff. If that sounds like what you need and what you want right now, go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. Dre all day.